Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Forum, a weekly program of the Columbus Metro Club, where we cultivate the conversations and connections that drive Columbus forward. The Forum brings together visionary leaders, CEOs, members of Congress, college presidents, UN ambassadors, artists, and changemakers to examine issues that matter, exchange diverse perspectives, and forge connections that create a better Columbus. I'm Doug Buchanan, Editor-in-Chief of Columbus Business First. I'm also proud to serve as a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and Chair of the Program Committee. For those of you joining us by live stream, we're coming to you from the Ellis in Columbus's historic Italian village. So thank you very much to them and to the sponsors of today's forum, the Aloft Columbus University District, Encova Insurance, GBQ, Porter Wright Morris and Arthur, and Learfield Ohio State Sports Properties. Let's have a hand for those supporting the CMC. We also have a presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream and promotional partner is the Columbus Dispatch. And we're also grateful to the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a village, so let's thank those group of sponsors as well. Okay, today, few businesses are changing faster than college athletics. Driving much of this momentum is the rise of NIL, name, image, and likeness. Deals that allow student athletes to earn money through sponsorships and endorsements. It's a game-changing shift that's reshaping the landscape of college sports. And today we'll take an inside look at how this new era is playing out on and off the field at The Ohio State University, home to the nation's most valuable college athletics program and the reigning national champion. So how about that? To introduce today's speakers, please welcome to the podium Ralph Smithers with today's sponsors, Encova Insurance. Ralph.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. Good afternoon. I'm Ralph Smithers, Jr. I'm with Encova Insurance. I am the AVP of Inclusion, Belonging, and Community Relations, and it's a real honor to be here today. And I want to just give a few very, very brief remarks about why this particular conversation is so aligned with our organization. So, first of all, Encova has been a sponsor of Ohio State Athletics probably for as long as I've been around, which is a long, long time. And back when we were Motors Insurance, I first learned about the company from the radio jingles going way back. But there's even more, so I'm going to give you a few landmarks that you can identify. If you go to Ohio Stadium and you go to the Rotunda, you'll see the stained glass that was put in by our organization. And one thing I'm going to tell you today that you will not be able to unsee after I tell you this is that if you watch the games real closely, the football games, you'll notice that the Encova logo is on all the coaches' headsets. So from now on, you heard it here, and you will not be able to unsee that. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I have the honor to welcome today's speakers. So first is the Ohio State Athletics Director for The Ohio State University, Ross Bjork. And also, thank you. And also our host, Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor for NBC4 Today. Matt, welcome back, and we look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you all for being here for this conversation. And I don't know about you all, anyone else confused by what's happening in college sports every now and then? I mean, it's hard to get the clarity right now. I mean, every week something changes, so glad that Ross is here to kind of clear some of it up. But let's just start with, you've only been here for about 13 months or so. Just how's it been? I mean, in terms of the challenges you knew were coming when you started Ohio State, taking on a program this big, how has the first year at the helm been?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that sounds like a lifetime contract with Encova. Ralph?
I heard that.
Right? I mean, so we can extend that or renew, you know, we'll have those conversations later. But no, it's really been a fascinating transition and really a time and place in our industry, but also just for Ohio State, right? And myself, in my professional journey and in my career, and as a husband and as a dad as well. And so when this opportunity came up, you know, it was sort of driving by a couple times, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm at a great program, you know, family's happy. our kids were thriving in, school and sports, being there at Texas A&M. It's a great program, lots of passion. And, again, the bus kind of kept driving by like, hey, are you interested? Are you not? And, really, I would have to look my mom in the eye and say, hey, I'm not interested. But she's from Northwest Ohio. She grew up on a family farm. And so that would have been the toughest conversation, to say, hey, Mom, by the way, they called, and I just said, no, we're good here at Texas A&M. So I would have been, like, shunned from the family forever. So there was a personal connection. And then, when I got to know President Carter and interacted with him, just seeing his leadership, seeing what he stood for, seeing what his vision is for Ohio State, and, really latching on and being his first hire, when he transitioned a year ago. And then just a question came up in the process. Hey, by the way, you want to hire me now, but what is Gene Smith going to do between now and June 30th of last year? And I don't know if there was a true plan. Excuse me for shouting there for a second. But the way we mapped it out was, hey, there could be this amazing overlap. So I got here the 1st of March of 2024. Gene was not stepping away until June 30th of 2024. So honestly, that 4-month gift was amazing. To be able to sit in a room, not say much. If they asked my opinion, I would give it. But I tried to really just observe, learn, understand the culture, understand the people, get to know, certain things about the community, build relationships where there wasn't the day-to-day pressure per se. Yeah, we had to make some decisions that had long-term impact. But if I didn't have that 4-month period, I'm not sure I would have been as well equipped. And look, there's probably things I've done already that people are like, I can't believe you did that. Can't believe you said that. There's already stuff that happens that way. But it really allowed this amazing transition to understand the people, the culture, all the things that we do really well, all the things that we can improve upon, right? Because no place is perfect. But having that transition of understanding how powerful the culture is here and what comes with that, but also understanding it's delicate and don't pierce it, don't mess that up, I think was a really true gift. But then, look, there's no honeymoon. Given our industry, we had to walk in, and I was part of some planning meetings, and we have a lot of athletic department staff here. If they would raise their hands, if you guys would raise your hands. We have our Ohio State sports property staff here. We have some current student athletes. We have former athletes. So there was already a lot of things in motion from a planning. So I was able to see some of that. But then you have to decide right away, what's going to happen with the House case settlement? How do we maintain 36 sports, but also thrive? How do we embrace commercial activity, right? We're adding scholarships. Some sports, we took less scholarships, right? So we had to walk in and make decisions right away. But working with the people, that's been the magical part of this. So a lot to it. We were just joking with Doug. He's like, yeah, you kind of set the bar high. And I'm like, well, that was lucky, right? I walked into that winning a national championship, but we won't take it back. We'll still take the national championship. But now it's like, how do we build upon it? How do we grow? But really the first year has just been an awesome experience for our family, professionally, personally. It's been great.
I think most of the people in this room have gotten used to the name, image, likeness. That we've seen people endorsing different companies now. They're out in the community helping out with charities, whatever it might be. But what is new coming up this year is the revenue sharing. I think that's something that a lot of people are still kind of confused about. You all can now help pay the players from your own pot and per se. How much money is it? How do you decide how to divvy up the money? It's $20.5 million. Is that right?
We almost need a whiteboard.
Seriously.
We could get out a screen and really, because there's a lot of complications to it, right? There's a lot of things that maybe aren't as well, known to the community or even some of our athletes, right? I mean, just because there's so many moving parts to this. But essentially, what happened is there was a court case. There was a lawsuit that got filed 5 or 6 years ago called the House case, and it really called for that athletes should be able to receive compensation from universities. And if you look at the pro world, typically profits are shared about 50-50 between the athlete in the pro organization or the pro sports team. You know, in college, we've always had scholarship. And then we added cost of attendance, and then we added an academic award piece. And those numbers here at Ohio State were well over $30 million that we were supporting our student athletes in the form of scholarship. Well, this lawsuit called for they should receive revenue. And it really started out as there should be back payments to athletes over the last 10 years in football, men's and women's basketball. And that was it, because they drove a lot of the revenue. But moving forward, there was going to be an allocation of money that would come from the athletic department that we could give right back to the student athlete in the form of what's called institutional NIL payments. Revenue share is the buzzword, but that's really the definition in the court case settlement. So being at my previous stop, these conversations started happening in the spring of 2023 that, look, if we want clarity in our business, our enterprise of college athletics, we could take the risk and go to court and go in front of a judge, go in front of a jury, and what happens then? Does it become 50% on top of, $35 million on scholarships? Or do we try to have a roadmap where we can settle the case? So these conversations started happening, 2 years ago now. How do we settle the House case? What do the numbers look like? The plaintiff attorneys, they started out at a big number, and the way it's settled was it's a 22% allocation of the average revenue of the autonomy 4 conferences, Big Ten, SEC. Is anybody confused yet? Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, ACC. Ticket sales, college football playoff money, sponsorship revenue, licensing, right? Television revenue that we get from the Big Ten, average that across, and it's 22% of the average of all of those institutions. In the first year, that equals $20.5 million. So starting on July 1st of this year, in our budget, we allocated $20.5 million of revenue share dollars. To add even more confusion, we added over 90 scholarships because scholarships were also part of the settlement. There's always been this restriction. You can only have 85 football scholarships. You can only have 11.7 baseball scholarships. You can only have 22 scholarships. In women's soccer, we were always in a restrictive environment around scholarships. The settlement allowed for you can have as many scholarships as you want, but now there's a roster limit. So we added over 90 scholarships. So because we added new scholarships, that counted against the $20.5 million. So what we're spending in revenue share institutional NIL is $18 million for this year. It goes up 4% every year. There's look-in periods. So I'd say over the next 4 or 5 years, that number's probably going to be around $30 million. We came out back in the middle of June and announced that we will share that revenue with 4 sports: football, men's and women's basketball, and women's volleyball. We hope we can expand that over time, but as we start this, as we learn more about it, we chose their sports. Obviously, football is an obvious one, right? Market value. Men's basketball, same thing. But, women's volleyball is growing. That's an emerging sport. That's a big sport in the Big Ten. Lots of popularity, lots of TV viewership. We're hosting the women's NCAA Final Four, women's volleyball in 2027. I'm looking at Linda Logan over here from the Columbus Sports Commission. So volleyball for us, we thought was an investment that we should make. But the new scholarships, 23 of our sports have more scholarships than they had last year. Right, and so those are the kind of things that we had to invest, but it's taken more revenue, an expense sort of recalibration of how we spend our money. We have to think of things differently. There's just a lot to it. I give so much credit to our team for mapping a lot of these things out even before I got here, and then we had to plug and play and start making decisions. So that was a whiteboard exercise. Hopefully everybody kind of followed the math and the mechanics behind it.
But even when I just saw you 2 weeks ago at a different event, something else happened. I mean, something happened after another thing. We had President Trump put out an executive order. I know the title of it said "Save College Sports," but it had much more to it underneath that. What did that change for you all as an athletic department?
Yeah, here's the fascinating thing is we settled the lawsuit for clarity in a roadmap, in a framework, right? But at the same time, you have up to 40 states that have a state law, including Ohio, and we pushed, even since I've been here, we pushed for a few changes to that state law. You have state by state law operating NIL environment. So some of those state laws conflict with the House case settlement. The only entity, like it or not, the only entity that can solve this is the federal government. They could have oversight of college athletics, a framework. How does revenue share be codified by the House case? How does employment status work? Right? There's a debate about should athletes be employees or not. Congress is the only one. So what the executive order did was at least provide a little bit of an umbrella around the House case, but really the authority of it is still going to rest in Congress. We can't give up the discussion in Congress. There is a bill that's passed House Energy and Commerce called the SCORE Act. That's the farthest any bill has made it in the federal government process. Now we're going to go to a civics class. We just had a math class. Now we're going to go to civics. But they just passed this SCORE Act through the House. We hope it gets to the floor. It will have a fight in the Senate. We know that it'll be a fight in the Senate. How it gets changed, we'll have to. But the executive order at least showed, look, when we were at the White House in April, we were able to, engage with White House staff, with Vice President Vance. He's a Buckeye, big fan, right? And the president, and they care about athletics. They know that they need to help. So the executive order was a step in saying, we acknowledge it, we know we need to help, but we also have more work to do. So there's still, when you ask about, like, is anybody confused about college athletics? I think my staff is the one who, because they're dealing with this change on a daily basis. So there's still a lot of moving parts. There's still work to be done in the new governance structure called the College Sports Commission, which governs all the House case elements. We got such a late start that a lot of those pieces are not built. They have 3 staff members hired. They really need probably 30 to 40 people, right? So they're building this roadmap, and I've described it as we're not building the plane as we're flying it. The landing gear is already deployed, and we're like on the runway already, and we're still building the plane. So a lot of moving parts, but federal government intervention will have to happen. Otherwise, we're going to be in the courtroom. We need just authority to be able to set rules without being sued. Federal government can protect us on that. So there's just a lot of things that are still have to come to fruition.
Let's add another another thing into this. The collectives. That's what we all got used to. We all thought, oh, the collectives are gonna fund these athletes as they start their name, image, and likeness journey. What happens to those now that we've gone into this, again, the buzzword revenue sharing model? Are they allowed to be? Are they still allowed to exist, or are they not allowed to exist anymore?
Okay, now we're going to put a third hat on. We're going to put a legal hat on, right? And so now you have to go through this analysis. So what's really fascinating about the House case settlement is there's specific language in there about third-party NIL and the ability for athletes to engage in third-party NIL. And it talks about it has to be for a valid business purpose. That was agreed upon. It has to be for goods and services available to the public, something along those lines. And then it says it has to meet a range of compensation for a similar individual that's situated as either a student, an athlete, a business person, whatever. So those 3 things were codified in the settlement. So then what happened is we have this whole world around collectives, and we've had multiple collectives here. Some are really specific for for one sport, and then some kind of cover all of our sports. We've had great activism. We've had great people that have volunteered their time. These were not full-time jobs for these individuals that helped us, but they dove right in and helped our student athletes really engage in NIL activity. So we thought that world would shift, right? That collectives would kind of morph into maybe something else. And we created a group called Buckeye Sports Group. Ohio State Sports Properties is operating that. And so collectives were deemed sort of maybe they were going to fade away, right? But what happened a couple weeks ago is that definition of a valid business purpose was tested. just because somebody calls themselves a collective doesn't mean they're not a business, right? They should have a business purpose that meets the settlement terms. So if we anchor to the settlement terms, a collective can be a business. And so what happened is I think initially the College Sports Commission said, hey, collectives can no longer. But we forgot to say, but if they meet a valid business purpose, they can call themselves whatever they want, as long as they meet those tests. The other element to this is the athletes have to submit a contract, an NIL contract, through a clearinghouse that goes through all these analysis. So there was look, it's been a bumpy start, right? And that's what gets confusing in the marketplace. Like, wait a second, are collectives back? Well, look, they never went away from a business standpoint. But what happened in the last 4 years is we've had collectives, and again, rightfully so, that was the rules of engagement, basically could pay an athlete directly and have little sort of marketing engagement, right? And so it kind of became a pay-for-play model. And look, Ohio State, we've been in the game, and we embraced it because that was the rules of the game. Well, this is a shift, right? The athlete, again, has to have services that they give back to that business to meet the test that is in the lawsuit. So it's a little bit of a bump. We're getting clarity. We think there might be rules published and some of this coming out here in the next couple of days, but this was supposed to start up on July 1st. The settlement didn't get approved till June the 6th. And so now we're kind of in this race to kind of play catch up a little bit. So we believe there will be clarity. We believe that the market will be what the market should be. We believe we can have unique advantages here at Ohio State. We're deploying Buckeye Sports Group. They're active right now in the marketplace to try to source, marketing agreements with athletes and businesses. There's ways for all of you to engage. We can share information. So these things all have to get built. And again, we're flying that plane as we're landing, or building it as we land it. And so there's just a lot of moving parts to get clarified.
Until there is clarity, though, are you seeing different programs operating different ways? I'm not saying they're cheating or any ways, because honestly, the rules aren't set right now.
This is recorded, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right, okay.
I mean, are you seeing different programs act different ways in the way they're offering, recruits certain deals and money right now? Because it does seem like, from my eyes, certain programs are doing that.
Yeah, look, that's the hardest part. When you sit in front of a coach and he or she tells you, hey, look, I just heard this about a program. This is what they're doing. One, there's no way to verify that, for sure, right? We can read a lot of things on social media. We can hear things kind of in the marketplace. So one, there's no way to verify. And then you might have an agent conversation that says, hey, this is what's going on in the marketplace. And look, we have good relationships with a lot of agents, but again, we can't see a database. We can't see what that is truly. So it adds to confusion. So I think what people have done in this gap, when, again, no clarity per se on July 1st, hey, we had the settlement on June 6th, the rules have not been published. What does enforcement look like on the back end? I think people are saying, you know what, forget about it. We're just going to go, sort of burn the ships. So is that sustainable? I don't think it is, right? And so, look, we should always be doing the right thing at Ohio State. That should be a leadership standard that we never waver from, while at the same time, how do we remain aggressive in the marketplace? That's why we have Buckeye Sports Group. That's why our collectives, they never went away. They're still, those people, those executives, they're still engaged. Those entities are still up and running. So we have the ability, we've already pivoted on a few things. We have the ability to engage, but at the same time, no one knows, okay, in 6 months, does enforcement start ramping up? And all the people that committed those deals that were not part of the structure, what happens? That's a big risk, right? And so that's what we're hearing in the marketplace. That's what we're continuing to cross-check, continuing to ask for clarity. Again, like I said, maybe in the next couple of days we get some of these rules of engagement from the College Sports Commission. We've submitted deals through the clearinghouse that have got approved in hours. We've submitted deals that we're still waiting on. So it's in flux, and that's the hardest part about what we're dealing with.
told you it was confusing. It's wild.
Yeah.
Are you worried that as, the old school, 30, 40 years ago, when you got recruited, it was all about the fit. It might have been location, whatever it might have been. Are you worried that recruiting has turned to less about the fit and the coaches and how you feel about a school to just how much money I'm getting?
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest analysis, I think, for the purity, right? And if you want to say, hey, we want to protect the way it was is not going to be the way it is, right? And it shouldn't be, right? We never really adapted to, I think, technology. We were talking over here with Ralph over here. We never really adapted to all the new money in the system. We could have done so many other things to adapt to this environment to not put us in a legal risk. So it'll never be the way it was. But here's what I keep saying about what the future is. Here's the three things. I started with two, but now it's three. We will go to class, and we will play the games. And we will also develop young people. Those three things. I mean, we have current student athletes here that are part of our Bucks Go Pro program. We are developing them to be the best version of themselves outside of sports. So those three things are not going to go away. Go to class, play games, develop young people. However, you have to have an economic discussion now. So that is totally new and different. And some people are uncomfortable with that, but I think the programs, the coaches that embrace it, we started a whole new unit around intelligence and strategy for our sports, sort of a central kind of general manager approach. You have to put resources in place to adapt. So I do believe that the athlete, look, there's athletes that only care about money. We get it. And we'll have those conversations, and that's fine. I do believe that 95 to 98% of our athletes, maybe even 99%, they want the full experience. They really do. Do they want to make money? Everybody does. But how am I set up for the next 20 years, 40 years, right? How do I secure my future through business, through contacts, through an internship, through an advanced degree? A lot of athletes are finishing their undergrad in 3 years, and they're staying for a master's degree, right? So we're providing so much opportunity that we can't lose that part of it. If we ever untether from the academic mission, then it's a whole new world. Presidents aren't going to agree to that. Board of Trustees should not agree to that. We should not agree to that. The public should not agree to that. We added professional elements, and that's okay. We can deal with that. But at the end of the day, it's education first. We have a 3.4 grade point average of all of our athletes. That's 1,000 athletes. It's the highest on record. Our football team had 1,000 APR score. The only program this past year that had 1,000 APR score. The GPA of football is like a 3.2, I think, which again, highest on record. So again, is it different? Are the economics part of the conversation? Yes. Can we embrace that at the same time, not forgetting about the mission and our values? Absolutely. And so that's, to me, the conversation that has to remain at the forefront.
I know part of your job and part of the job of the head coach too is, with all this happening, with all the money going around with these teams, are you worried about players on the team comparing what they're getting, what they're not getting, the different sports, different athletes, they're constantly talking and feeling like it's fair or unfair? Did any of that become a problem? Did you notice in this past year, and not just football, other sports as well? It's just so much money, and for some, it's coming freshman year. They haven't even played it down or played a game, and they're automatically signing deals already. Have you seen that be a problem among the student athletes?
It hasn't bubbled up. Do those conversations happen in the locker room? Of course. Look, our athletes are smart. They're sophisticated. I mean, we got athletes here in the room. They can probably tell stories. Those conversations happen. Right? And I really believe that the athletes are sophisticated enough to say, look, the high-profile athletes, they have their market. If I'm a developmental player, then I have my market. I really believe that's part of it. Locker rooms have had disparity for a long, long time, right, in terms of either playing time, walk-ons, I'm on scholarship. So that part has been, but I think in this new world, it's just a more robust conversation. So I do believe that our coaches, part of their job now is to really be as transparent as you can, and handle the culture and the really leadership of your locker room more so than ever. The teams that are going to thrive, I think, in this new era are going to have a strong foundation. They're going to have honest conversations. They're going to have a great culture. So if there is a bump in the road, they can deal with it in an honest fashion. To me, those are going to be and that's going to be kind of a secret sauce. Managing, okay, here's revenue share and sort of roster value, but also I still have to compete. So the pressure and the execution, I think, have to go hand in hand as we move into this new era. So look, has it happened? Sure, there's been some bubble up, but in terms of a really robust problem, we haven't seen that.
Another change in college athletics, it's been a few years now, it's the transfer portal. You can't look at any team, it seems like among Big Four, maybe even more, where from year to year, there's 25 to almost 50% changes on some of these rosters.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I think a lot of people were happy to see. If you're not happy in the situation you're in and you want to go somewhere else and get the opportunity, feel free to go. You used to have to sit out a year. I don't think a lot of people thought that was fair. Coaches can go on a dime. Players have to sit out. But are you worried how quickly it's happening? How, as you know, with the football team was in the middle of a playoff chase, and you had players in the transfer portal at the same time, trying to balance one to go to new school but be on the team they're on. What changes would you like to see to that part of college athletics?
Yeah, if you really take a step back and you couple NIL and really kind of unregulated environment with unlimited transfer opportunities, that's really what we're dealing with, right? And when you combine those two, it creates fear, angst, uncertainty. Who's on my team? Is this person coming back, right? So that's never happened in the history of college athletics where you couple that together. I remember the world, even when I first became an AD, where you would have to sign, somebody wanted to transfer. They knew they had to sit out a year, but you could even restrict where they could go. Hey, I don't want this athlete going to anybody in my conference. Check, right? Well, that was really unfair, right? And especially in a legal environment, but it was never tested. And then it became, well, okay, we can't restrict that anymore, but you still have to sit out a year. And then it came to, well, you know what? You can transfer and play right away, no matter how many times you do it. And so that's the world that we're in. And really, I was on a couple transfer working groups in previous stops, and we were always told least restrictive environment, which again is the right thing to do. But what we need framework around the timing of it. We're all in, look, if an athlete's unhappy, they should be able to look elsewhere. We support that. But how is it structured? What's the timing to match up with the academic calendar? What's the timing to now match up with a contract that we will have with an athlete who's receiving institutional NIL? We've kind of lost that conversation. We're trying to get it back where we can have some structure. So what I want to see is a single transfer portal for all of our sports. You have fall sports, you have spring sports. How do we get to a single window? And then how does that align with the academic calendar? And then how does that align now with a contract that we'll have with an athlete? So I think we can make some progress. Everyone acknowledges that there's an issue around the timing, but now we have this, I could give you a whole list of stuff we've dealt with, but now we have this governance conversation. Okay, who's in charge? Is it the NCAA? Is it the College Sports Commission? Is it the 4 commissioners of the Big Four conferences that I mentioned? So now we have this winding road of where does that decision-making live now? And so literally I was just on a phone call walking in here because a reporter was calling and saying, hey, I heard about this, and what are the next steps? And I said, I don't know yet. We're seeking that clarity on where does the transfer portal window lie from a governance standpoint. Hopefully this fall, going into August and September, we'll have that roadmap. We'll map out the timing of all of this and have the clarity that everyone needs.
Well, I'll ask another question here in a second, but do want to let you know it's a long-standing tradition of Columbus Metropolitan Club to have audience questions. So if you do have a question for Ross, feel free to go to the other Doug Buchanan of CMC in the back, waving his hand. You can head to the microphone and line up there, and we will take audience questions in just a bit. I do want to ask you about some of the sports that aren't as known, the footballs, the basketballs, because you have 36 sports. It's a fantastic and robust athletic department. I don't know how you do it. But having covered a couple Olympics and seeing all those Buckeyes who are just killing it and all the much smaller sports we don't talk about, worried about this, keeping the sanctity of those sports, being able to still fund those sports with having to fund those other big sports as much as you are. Because I know you don't want to lose any of those 36. Many of them are doing amazing or getting amazing results. That's why your guys are killing it in the Learfield Cup. But are you worried about possibly losing those sports and losing scholarships or money to fund them?
As we went through the planning exercise, again, when I got here, there was already a roadmap and a lot of discussion already happening. It was called Project 36. That's what was named to do this study of how does this work? How do we pay for it? What's the house case settlement going to do? What's revenue sharing? What's scholarships? We had all kinds of options on the table, right? I mean, from having just non-scholarship sports, right, to, okay, what does eliminating sports really look like? That's a dangerous, I know at your alma mater, one of your athletic directors dropped some sports, and that's ugly, right? And so that was the last thing. We said, we're not doing that, but we have to pay for it. So there was a deep dive. So here's our perspective, is how do we maintain the same experience for the student athlete that they had before in the new era? Look, maybe we have to trim a little around the edges. Maybe we travel a little bit differently, but what kind of gear do they have? What kind of coaching do they have? We'll never take shortcuts on, mental health, sports medicine, the training piece. How do we make sure we have nice enough facilities, right, where they're not crumbling and deteriorating, right? So how do we keep making the right investments around the performance piece, even though the business side may look a little bit different? We went through a lot of exercises around that, but the mantra was maintain the student athlete experience, period. And then a lot of detail that goes behind that. And look, I think the mantra here is, if we're going to have the sport, we want them to be successful. Big Ten championships, we have sports that compete in other conferences, but championships at the conference level and make deep runs in the postseason. We finished 8th in the Directors' Cup. We had Final Four appearances. We lost in the Women's Ice Hockey National Championship by 18 seconds. Scored a controversial goal, right, McKenna? Sorry to bring that up, but we had so many great performances from men's soccer. Men's lacrosse was Big Ten champions, hosted an NCAA tournament game. I mean, I could go on and on down the list. Pistol won a national championship. Our cheerleading and dance teams won national championships. Obviously, the football piece. So those things, that's the fun part. And that's what makes all of this worthwhile, is that those experiences, that marketing vehicle that we provide for the institution, like the winning piece, the brand exposure, the postseason runs, by women's basketball, and we're going to get men's basketball back going again. And those things create this brand aura that continues, the legacy of Ohio State. So we're not going to let that go away, even though we got to figure out how to pay for it, right, and adjust to all these things. Those are the experiences that you don't want to lose.
Again, if you want to ask a question, please head toward the back. If you do have a question, I just want to remind you, questions end with a question mark. So let's just go up there and pontificate about how much we don't like that team up north or whatever it might be. But yes, if you have a question for us, please head to the back, line up behind Doug. But Doug is also cultivating questions. If you're watching on the live stream, you can put that in the live stream question as well. So Doug, you can take off.
Matt, thank you very much. And Ross, thank you very much. Great conversation. Matt, you stole my line. Thank you. Yes, questions do end in a question mark. Great questions at CMC can also be asked in just a few seconds so we can get to as many questions as possible. If you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can too. I'll launch us off with this one. Is there any discussion about making restitution to former athletes who didn't benefit from NIL?
So as part of I did not mention this part of it, the house case settlement has back payments. It goes back a 10-year period, and that's really a antitrust window. Is there any attorneys in the room that can help me on this? Luke is. So that's really the antitrust window. So it couldn't go back any longer than that. So athletes, they had to go to a website. There's a website that was published. Athletes could go sign up for back payment. And there's a different calculation. I think it was over 300 and some thousand athletes have signed up for back payment. That number was $2.8 billion minus attorney fees. And so whatever was left over, around $2 billion is being shared. Did you get any? No, you're past the window.
No, I got none.
But so restitution was already covered by the House case settlement.
Excellent. Luke Fedlam, Amundsen Davis. Ross, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd be interested in your thoughts on private equity in college sports. There's been a lot of discussion. You know, you even mentioned it earlier, just about trying to find the money to do some of these things to keep sports, et cetera. There have been conversations around the value. I think New York Times just did an article yesterday, around the value of football teams, et cetera, at the college level. Could you just shed some light on, I know conferences are having some conversation about potentially getting involved with private equity, bringing private equity in. What do you see at the actual institutional level when it comes to private equity?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question, and at my previous stop is when all this conversation really started. So I would say probably late 2021, going into 2022, people were studying this, right? Right after COVID, right? A lot of athletic departments took major losses, including, you know, here at Ohio State. Everybody was really trying to find out, okay, what's next in this environment. So I think we were all curious about it. But I think when you work at a state institution like Ohio State, who owns Ohio State? The state of Ohio. I don't think the state of Ohio is for sale per se, right? Private equity typically wants a return on something. So how do you give them that return? How do you take an infusion of that money into a state entity, right? Our athletic department, we're part of the institution structure. We're not an affiliated, we're not separate. So it gets really complicated at the institutional level, and really it's a loan. We can finance a lot of things at Ohio State. We have a great wherewithal to do that. So institutionally, I think it's really hard. We have private equity all over our business. Learfield's owned by private equity. Anthony Travel's our travel partner. Levy's our concessionaire. Legends is our apparel. They're owned by private equity is in and around our space. So if there's strategic ways to deploy it through partners, maybe. But I think the conferences have the best ability. So it's already been publicized. The Big Ten is looking at it. We're having those conversations. It's really complicated, and you don't know what the upside is. You don't know what the exit plan would be for that entity. It comes with a lot more questions than, do we want the money? Sure, everybody would sign up for that, right? But what does it come with? Those are the things that we have to continue to analyze. It's not going to go away, but the fact that no institution has done it yet means it's really, really complicated and really hard. Good question. Thanks, Luke.
So you kind of expanded on this a little bit, but you talked about NIL and the effect in the recruiting world and bringing athletes to colleges. Do you think we'll get to a point with some of the contracts we're seeing with some of these players coming in, especially in the football world, where you're looking at, you know, the amount of money these guys are getting? You look similar to kind of modeling off of like the NFL, right? Do you think they'll ever get to a point where there will be a cap in college football for NIL for athletes? And then, you know, how does that affect the recruiting aspect of it for some of those smaller schools who don't have the cap space, like your Ohio States, you know, Alabama and Georgia's?
Yeah, so technically, there is a cap that was established by the House case, 22%. It's $20.5 million the first year. Technically, there's a cap. However, there is no cap in the third-party space. It's really what can your market bear? What do you have in the sponsorship world? What do you have, whether a collective is a business or not, right? That analysis that we talked about. So technically, the third-party NIL has no restrictions as long as it goes through that system. What you're seeing, kind of based on what Matt had talked about, like who's following those rules? Are people just ignoring those things? Are we creating a soft cap? The fact that that word was even introduced leads you to believe, like, okay, what does the roadmap look like? What is the number, right? 20.5 million on top of that, what's your third-party number? We don't know yet, because that infrastructure, that ecosystem is being built out. So in theory, that's where Columbus, Ohio State, will have some really unique advantages based on where we sit. What I look at, when I think about my peers, like at Ohio U, you're wearing green, by the way. I got to make fun of you for that. I've got athletic director friends all over the country. I think about like Louisiana Lafayette. They're really good in women's softball. In theory, they could spend $20 million in women's softball. They're probably not going to have that money to spend, but those programs, I think, can be really strategic on a per sport basis. Here at Ohio State, we have 4 that we're investing in. We added over 90 scholarships for, over 20 of our sports. We have to be more broad-based, but I think programs like, if Ohio U, if they had the money, they could spend a lot of money compared to their peers on the football team. Now, they got to have the money, but technically, they have no cap. 20 million's their ceiling, but they'll probably never get there. So I think you'll see a lot of niche programs really evolve. We're concerned in our conference about Johns Hopkins lacrosse. They play Division III in every sport except 2, men's and women's lacrosse. In theory, and Taji, I'm looking at Taji, he's on our lacrosse team, they could spend $10 million in men's lacrosse. We can't do that. So I think what you'll see is kind of these niche programs develop where you'll probably have these success points with these one-off programs because they have these niche sports. So I think it'll be fascinating to see how it all evolves. It's a good question, though.
Back in April of 2025, the University of Kentucky was really the first Power 4 school to announce that they would be trying to privatize their athletic department via an LLC formation. Could you just speak towards the implications of that as a state university? Does this preclude the University of Kentucky from any of the federal or state oversight that you had spoken about? And do you think that this will ultimately be sort of the leading, rationale for how to structure an athletic department going forward?
Yeah. That's on our list of all the challenges and opportunities that have come up in the last 5 years. Is what does sort of the enterprise piece of this look like? What does commercial activity look like? Kentucky will still have to abide by whether it's state law, federal law when that comes to happen, and also any NCAA governance. So just because they created a separate LLC does not preclude them from following their SEC guidelines. It looks like what they did is they tried to create a little more flexibility on how they could engage in maybe commercial activity or business initiatives. There are many athletic departments around the country that are already a separate LLC. University of Florida is a corporation, University of Georgia, Kansas. Many programs have separate athletic foundations that run their fundraising. Those are all still governed by the university. You have to have an affiliated organization. Ohio State, I think we have over 30 affiliated organizations here at Ohio State. So there's ways to do it, even though you're a public institution. We are very fortunate here. So we've studied it. We'll continue to look at it. But we're very fortunate here. We have a unit called Business Advancement that has a reporting line into athletics. So all the concerts that we run at the SHU, the Schottenstein Center, we have an operating agreement for Nationwide Arena downtown. We oversee Mershon Auditorium booking and scheduling for that. Trademarks and licensing, the Blackwell Hotel. We already have an entity that's really already created for the purposes that others are trying to create. We're in the concert business. We hosted the NHL Stadium Series. People are just now trying to build these enterprises to do what we've done here for 30 years. So we have a unit. We can deploy other resources if we need to. There is some flexibility, but it still has to be governed by state policies, board of trustees, university level. The key is, how do we remain nimble enough that if we need to pivot and adapt, we can do that? And that's where it's great about Ohio State. There's always this willingness to be creative and be a leader. It's a great question, though, something that we're following.
We have just a few minutes left. We'll try to squeeze in 2 quick final questions.
I don't have a money question. psychologist. I'm curious, you talked about what you're doing in terms of developing your athletes. I think you had kind of the platform in terms of for future, whether they go for pro sports or not. Could you tell a little bit more about the programming that Ohio State puts in place for kind of career success?
Yeah, we basically have sort of two layers. We have our SASO unit. It's our student athlete support services. So they do all the academic advising. They schedule tutoring. They work with class schedules. So you have this whole academic support system that is a great, robust system. We have over 20 employees in that unit to service all 1,000 athletes. And then we have the Gene Smith Leadership Institute. Career development, internship programs, community service, leadership programs that we go through. There's so many things that happen. I remember when I first got here, I did a session with our leadership program through the Gene Smith Leadership Institute, and one of the questions was, are you going to keep the Leadership Institute? And I said, how long do you want me to be your AD? Of course we're going to keep that and try to enhance it. So we have so many built-in programming elements that just, and I think you could ask our athletes how they dive into it even more than what I can tell you because they see it on the ground. 97% of the athletes who exhausted their eligibility last year graduated, going pro in their sport, have a job, or they are going to get a post degree. The 3% had something in the works. They just hadn't landed it yet when we did the calculation. So we have an amazing platform to support our student athletes. Thanks for asking that question.
Thank you, Ross. This could be a challenging one to answer in 2 minutes, but what do you think the business of college athletics will look like 5 years from now?
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, 5 days from now, right? What's going to happen next week? Or maybe something's already on Twitter that we haven't caught yet. You know, look, I really believe that we have to have the clarity. We have to have the durability of our systems. Because if we don't have that, we're going to be in this state of flux for the next 5 years. So I do think we'll get the durability, we will get the clarity, we will get back to sort of the center of what this is all about, the academic piece, the student development. Yes, we want to win. Yes, there's money, there's economics, there's conversations. I think you'll see even more layers of the financial arrangement between the athlete and the institution. Again, maybe more robust contracts. Perhaps we'll have clarity either by the government or the National Labor Relations Board about should athletes be employees or not. And people have different opinions on that, and some people think that's an easy pathway. It comes with a lot of complications, but I think we'll at least have clarity on that piece of it. I think the NCAA will kind of constitute themselves into championships, sport rulemaking, and you're going to continue to see an evolution of the College Sports Commission. That'll become more robust. And so those are the kind of things I see in the future. But again, the things that are not going to go away, education and games. That part will remain constant, but those are the things I see. We need clarity. We need guardrails, we need parameters, whatever you want to call it. And those things are coming. It's just not coming fast enough to move at this pace.
I'm going to add one quick question behind that. Do you see an expansion coming to the football playoff and March Madness?
Well, how much time do we have?
A minute.
You know, I do. The March Madness thing, I think, has been kind of set aside right now, but I do think there's going to be continued pressure. The automatic qualifying piece, the fact that 32 have automatic qualifying spots there's just a lot of good teams that are being left out. So I do think you'll see an expansion that's kind of been set off to the side until we get through some of this governance. Eventually, I think there'll be too much pressure not to expand the college football playoff. Right now, there's just not an agreement. You know, the Big Ten, we have our perspective. The SEC has their perspective. Those two conferences hold the authority to make the decisions. The ACC, you know, they're at the table, but they don't have the authority. The Big 12, same thing. So between Commissioner Petiti and Commissioner Sankey, I do believe that we'll get to a point where we can agree on parameters, but it may not happen this fall. So we may go into the first couple years of a new era with 12 teams, but eventually content is gold. People want live college football games. They want high-level games. There's going to be even, again, more pressure on money. So we will need that revenue to fuel the system. So it's going to expand. I think it's just a matter of how and when.
If you have any opinions, feel free to talk to Ross after. I'm kidding. Don't do that. Can you give him a round of applause? Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Go Bucks.
All right, everyone, I hope you found today's conversation fascinating. It is amazing how much in flux this situation still is. So we'll be watching that going forward. I want to thank again the sponsors of today's forum, the Aloft Columbus University District, Encova Insurance, GBQ, Porter Wright Morrison Arthur, Learfield Ohio State Sports, the presenting sponsor, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream and promotional partner, the Columbus Dispatch. How about a hand for them? How about another hand for Ohio State athletes who could join us today? Thank you very much. And an appreciation for today's speakers, Ross Bjork and our host, Matt Barnes. Thank you both very much. Okay, don't forget, right now you can join us next week, and you can register today for Central Ohio's AI Revolution. With the help of human experts, we're going to explore how AI is transforming Central Ohio's jobs and industries at light speed. That'll be next Wednesday. As for today, thank you all, and have a wonderful day.